In 1803, the brilliant scientist John Dalton was able to prove in the lab what the ancient Greeks thousands of years earlier thought might be true, that matter was made of incredibly tiny building blocks called atoms. Dalton thought that atoms were solid spheres like billiard balls, and that they were the smallest particles in the universe. But about 100 years later, scientists discovered that atoms were made of even smaller particles. This video shows how they were able to do that. In 1897, a clever Englishman called J.J. Thomson designed a glass tube filled with low-pressure gas and containing two metal plates inside. When he put a big electric charge on the plates, he found that the positively charged plate, called the anode, was able to pull a beam of tiny particles out of the negatively charged plate, called the cathode. Because the beam came from the cathode, he called them cathode rays, and he called the apparatus a cathode ray tube. You can see the beam as a blue line in the diagram. Where the cathode rays arrived at the anode, there was a little hole that allowed them to travel through and continue and pass between a pair of parallel plates that he could put varying charges on. Sometimes the top one was positive with the bottom one negative, and sometimes the other way round. The beam always bent away from whichever plate was negative and towards whichever plate was positive. This meant that the particles must have carried a negative charge, because we know that like charges repel and unlike charges attract. But here's the thing. Because the beams bent so easily, more than other particles going through the plates, he could work out that they must have been very light, thousands of times lighter than a hydrogen atom. Thomson realized that atoms had even smaller particles inside them, and that they carried a negative charge.